The Legacy House Publishing Group Podcast. Christian publishing made easy.
All right, Mr. Daniel Strazel. Daniel is an accomplished writer who wrote God, Man, and the Machine. It is one of the best fiction works I have ever read in my life. It is powerful, action-packed, and I am very blessed to call him my friend and brother. And we are here after Bible study at Mount Dora, the Cross, and Daniel has been kind enough to stay here and talk a little bit about his process when it comes to writing and what he used to be able to finish a phenomenal, very interesting, very action-packed, very intriguing, and will keep you gripped, a page-turner novel, God, Man, and the Machine. And I was very blessed to talk to him the other day about how do you finish a work and why is that important, and his whole writing process. And I was just really, really impressed. So I had him here today to talk to you about it. Daniel, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
God, Man, and the Machine. How does it feel to have completed such a big work of art?
Well, it's tremendously satisfying. In fact, life validating, right? To have a sense of finalization on a work, right? Like true finalization, feeling like you sat down, you began the project, you stuck through it all the way, you know, came over the hurdles that were presented to you, and finally we're able to turn out something and say, this is what I've done. You know, finally I'm capable of extending it to people above and beyond those that are intimately connected to me, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I liked a lot was that you said it wasn't easy for you, because sometimes people think, oh, well, some people are just writers and some people are not. You know, you just got it. You know how to write a novel. What would you say to a person who says that, well, I want to write and I like writing, but I can't finish my stuff? Some people just have that gift. I mean, how would you address that in a person?
Well, you know, everyone has to determine whether or not they actually want to write, right? You know, we feel like we want to write, but that might not necessarily be the most honest of feelings that we're having, right? Like, we need to analyze what our motivations are behind the writing. You know, as I mentioned the other day, you know, at one point, I was, you know, it's really more about wanting my peers to celebrate me, and more about me, you know, doing something that would leave some kind of footprint on the earth, or, you know, ratify my existence. But it really had very little to do with writing. You know, I spoke about being a writer. I talked about, you know, other people's writing and what flaws it had that I was capable of finding. But I didn't actually write. You know, I wrote very few words, and the few that I wrote over the course of time I was never happy with. You know, I could go years in between paragraphs, right, under the pretense that, well, I was still developing my work, you know. But really, I wasn't doing anything. I was finding every excuse to do everything other than. You know, I was watching other movies and reading other novels and playing video games and whatnot. Like, anything that I could do to keep myself distracted from actually putting down the work that I should have been putting down, that I felt compelled to put down, that I wanted to put down. And finally, you know, I had to analyze myself and say, you know, why are you putting these things ahead of your industry? You know, if this is who you know, have represented yourself to be, not even necessarily to others, but so much as to yourself, why is it that you are not developing your work? Why are you not pursuing your work? And, you know, invariably the answer always comes up: time. I don't have enough time. I don't have time to do my work. I don't have time to write. I don't have time to edit, and so on and so forth. And the reality of it is that you don't. You absolutely do not. You've got to make the time. You know, as an adult. Now, maybe if you are living it with your parents or something along that line, and you have not, you know, like you are in the stages of adolescence where you're still coming to grips with your identity and what life looks like, and developing your certain sense of self-discipline, and, you know, having the initiative to get up and go and whatnot. Like, if you're still in that stage, maybe you do have all kinds of time to devote to creation and to play. You know, and very little to work. But the difference is that once you've transcended that line of adolescence, and you are now suddenly responsible for how you look and how you act in society, and it's necessary for you to have established some kind of respect amongst your contemporaries, professional or otherwise, you have to come to a determination as to why it is you're doing what it is that you think that you want to do. If you say that you want to write and you're not willing to put forward the work, then you just should not write, because it is work. It's tremendous work. It's overwhelming work. Right, because you think you're going to get it easily because you get a great idea. You've got this wonderful quip that you've written into this this 5-page segment, but 5 pages, just is not going to make your novel.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to the person who, what's the thing that motivated you to say, you know what, I'm going to do the work, I'm going to practice what I preach?
Well, I really was, for one thing, very tired of referring to myself as a writer and not actually writing. I could see my own hypocrisy, and I didn't fancy that. But almost more to a point of mortality. If I don't start doing this, when am I ever going to start doing this? Right? Beginning is just as hard as finishing. Writing is like exercising. If you can't do 50 push-ups, you're never going to do 50 push-ups until you do one. Yes. Right? And writing is the exact same way. You're not just going to throw down a novel or, a 200-page book in the span of a month or two, especially if you care about your product.
Right.
If you don't care about your product, yes, you could probably spin that out. I've heard of a movie that was written in 48 hours, and it was plain. It was plain that it was, So, time and work is nothing to be ashamed of. If you're working on, I know an artist. He was pointing out one of his works to me in his home, and he said that work took him 20 years to do.
Wow.
And here's the thing. It didn't strike me as all that complex. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to wrap my head around why it could take this guy 20 years to make this dot and this stick figure man, as far as I could tell. I'm like, how is that 20 years worth of investment? But the way that it breaks down is that it just begins with the circle. And then he comes back to it when he feels so compelled to address that circle.
Okay.
Right? And little things just get added to it over the course of time, where now, it's a single piece, but really it's this collage of effort that has been put forth over the course of years to finally make this product. And because he wasn't doing it for money, right? And because he wasn't doing it to be measured by other people, mm-hmm. he didn't feel like he was under duress of time, so it could be exactly what it needed to be in and of itself. It's not something that he showed to someone in the middle and said, hey, what do you think of my circle here? Because then they're like, well, it's a circle. There's nothing to show, right? We've all drawn that circle,
yeah.
But then maybe some projects take 20 years to finish, right? If it's going to be good, if it's going to be worthy. Sometimes we get too close to our projects, right? And then we can't withdraw, we can't see them for what they are. Sometimes time needs to go on. But the reason why time went on with me, and the reason why I have ever struggled with writing, is that I didn't really know what I wanted to write. I just knew what I wanted to be. I didn't actually know what my product was going to look like. I had no idea as to what it was. I mused on a couple story ideas. Sure, absolutely. I can come up with novel ideas day and night. But to write them out is a whole nother story, as it were.
Wow. That's the most powerful thing to me, because I had a dream that I was in the church and I was doing some kind of menial task. I was sweeping up, and people were kind of looking at me with disdain, and I knew I should have been leading, but I just didn't get into it. And then at the end of the dream, the word praxis, the Lord kept telling me, praxis, Praxis. I had never heard of this word before. And I go in the living room because it disturbed me in the dream, and I'm praying, and I see these words, praxis, come up in larger fonts, right? And I say, okay, either I'm not hearing from the Lord or something, so I'm going to look this word up. I looked the word up. It's from an ancient philosophical whole school that was basically saying, you believe something, you have this philosophy, but have you actually experienced it? Praxis is the experiential philosophy, or like I like to say, putting feet to your philosophy. And there is no better way to fully experience something than to experience something. And so you're what I'm hearing you say is that you were saying you were a writer, but you weren't experientially fulfilling the calling of a writer. Now, there were some powerful things, man, that you wrote in this email to me, and I would love for you to go over this email because I think it's going to be a game changer for people who want to write. And I would love for you to go over some of the key points of the email to help people to understand, especially the thing on why are you writing, you know? But could you go over some of that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in one of the points in talking about why it is that you're writing, you know, I think it's good if you identify for yourself why you're writing, right? And in order to kind of shortcut that, I've put forward a couple, you know, options that you may use to describe what it is that you're doing with your writing or why it is that you want to write. Very good. You know, like, why are you writing? Are you writing for fame? Or do you need to have before your peers this sense of achievement that they, you know, these fame and achievement, right, kind of translate into respect, right? And to broaden that even more, it is how you want to do this because you think that it will impact how others look at you, right? Then, you know, perhaps you're writing a chronicle, right? Like you're writing a story about your life, you're writing a story about what has happened, you're writing a some kind of nonfiction work where, you know, you have witnessed events or you have spoken to people that have witnessed events and you find it necessary to put down this ledger so that history is preserved in such a manner as to be integral. Well, now, you know, this translates into kind of a principle, right? Like you're writing for a sense of principle, and this is about, you know, to broaden that, about how you view yourself. You know, if you respect the work that you're going to put down, so much easier is it for you to put down that work in the first place. Because if, you know, whether you are writing for others or writing for yourself, whatever it is that you're writing for, whatever your reasons are, if you don't respect what it is that you're doing, it's going to translate into your work.
That's beautiful.
So you've got to know why you're writing in the first place. I also said, you know, maybe you're writing for money, right? Or as part of your career. You envision yourself as someone that can turn out page after page after page, and you know that, you know, if you market this work, that someone will pay you and remunerate you for your time, you know, to purchase the rights so that they might distribute it in a more, you know, commandingly effective manner than you might do on your own, or so on and so forth. Well, then, you know, this is kind of a utilitarian view as to writing, right? You're not really writing for pleasure. You're not writing for pain. You're really just, you know, you're writing for the money. You know, you think you've got, you know, a certain talent, and this has obviously been encouraged, you know, over the course of time, and you think that you're going to make your living doing this, right? Now, granted, hopefully you don't have this balloon idea that you're going to go out, write a novel, and get, you know, $1 million in contract rights for it. That you understand that when you write as a career, it typically begins in like journalism or it begins in short story writing, you know, where you're pounding out thousands of words for $50, you know, at a time. You know, that's what it means to make a career. As a, you know, if writing is hard work, doing what you do because you love it, imagine how hard it is doing what you do because that is the way that you make money, right? Like a lot of pressure going on there. But some people are simply utilitarian. I am utilitarian about my vehicle. You know, if it's got 4 wheels and it gets me from point A to point B, it doesn't have to have any more frills. Some people approach writing in the exact same manner, right? It's as long as it gets them from point A to point B, that's the alpha, the omega. And there's nothing wrong with that perspective either. Like, you know, just to put out a blanket statement, there's no wrong way to approach writing. Maybe you write because for you it's a sense of play. Or maybe you write because you just like the process of creation, right? Like that is your whole investment in writing. And what I call this the creative view, right? It's just you have this overwhelming desire to create, you enjoy doing it, you don't feel stressed while you're doing it, and so on and so forth, and you just do it. And you don't show it to anyone because you probably don't complete it because you're just playing, right? But the point is that you are doing something, and you are actively writing, which is more than I did for years, right? Like, but, you know, so long as you are, you know, but again, going back to this, none of the answers are wrong, but you need to understand why you're driven to write. And if you understand why you are being compelled to write, then you can start to research the best method or resources to help you continue to write. You know, if you're writing for the industry, you should be paying very close attention to what the industry is. If you're writing because you want to create a work of art, or, you know, and so forth, then you talk to people that are independent artists. I'm very, do-it-yourself kind of oriented. Does that mean that that's the only right way to approach it? Absolutely not. You know, like that is the medium that I need to approach it, because that's what works for me, and that's what helps me, complete this. But I also have a very commanding understanding as to why I am doing what I am doing, and that gives me the fuel to get to the end. I can get to the finish line because I understand why I'm doing it. If I didn't understand why I was doing it, I would not be able to create any kind of product. It would all be half products.
You know, Tony Robbins is big on the why. You know, a lot of people know Tony Robbins, a big-time motivational speaker. He said if you know your why, that does give you the juice to be able to do things. And before you said that to me about, it's like I really believe the big questions are important to get those settled before you can build. That's like a foundation. Where you're talking about is a foundation. Why are you doing this? And that's so awesome. For me, as a Christian writer, my motivation is to inspire people to a closer relationship with God, and to come out of the Holy Spirit and to write something that's going to touch the heart and the spirit of another person. So that motivates how I approach it, which means I do it through prayer. I make sure I pray. I make sure I listen. I make sure that that it comes across in a way that's going to touch the heart of somebody. I wouldn't have really thought about why if I wouldn't have heard you tell me about this. But in the understanding of why I'm doing this, then I can be more focused on the modality and what I use to be able to accomplish that end. So I think that is excellent. So you writers out there, get your why down. And like Daniel said, be honest about it. Any way you want to do it is cool, but just know why you're doing it. It's okay to write for money.
Right.
It's okay to write for esteem of yourself or esteem from your colleagues, but know your why so you can operate in that with integrity. And then everyone knows everything's above board. Now, could you go forward with some of the other things you wrote to me in the email? That was very fun.
You're tuned in to the Legacy House Publishing Group podcast with Ross Jones. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
If you have written a Christian book, wouldn't it make sense to get it published with a Christian company? Legacy House Publishing Group is your Christ-centered alternative. We'll help you design a beautiful cover because, believe us, books are judged by their covers. We also do book formatting, public relations, marketing, and more. We love Christian writers, and we handle budgets big and small. Visit LegacyHousePublishingGroup.net and see what we can do for you.
We now return to the Legacy House Publishing Group podcast with Ross Jones, where Christian publishing is made easy.
Well, we've already talked to some degree about how difficult it is to write, and that it is in fact work, right? Like we think that it's all fun, but it's not all fun, right? Even if you enjoy what you're doing, even if you respect what you're doing, right? Like even if you have all of these, somewhat noble moral investments into what it is that you are creating, that does not necessarily mean that it is always fun, because it's not always fun. In fact, like there are many points which will only be like a letdown for you, because you're going to want to tie together scenes and you're not really going to be sure how to tie them together, and maybe you just transition it, and you're just never happy with the fact that you just transitioned. You're like, man, I really should have, I should have had a dialogue, or I should have said, that the character took a cab and they got their sleeve wet on the window. Like, don't worry about that. Right? It's not about second guessing every single thing. And when you have to make that transition that you don't want to make, or you want to insert that bad dialogue, like he said, she said, no, he said, why she said, because he said, you don't want to put that in there. It's boring, it's bland, it doesn't do anything for you. But in order to finish your work, maybe it has to go in there. And frankly, your reader will forgive you if you've got great scenes around it. Not every word has got to be Pulitzer Prize. Not every word, a lot of us, especially if you've got a compulsive disorder, right, which most writers do, frankly, let's just cut to the quick. Every single word has to be perfect. Every single medium, the characters have to act in such a way to the point where your literature will start to suffer, right? Because you have decided that this is where everything has to be and it has to fit in your idea, blah, blah, blah. And good. That's good that you do that. But at the same time, just understand that not everything you put on paper is going to be rewarding.
That's awesome. The thing that me and Tracy have, Tracy is my wife, the hardest thing we have sometimes in dealing with clients that we take on as publishing clients, we have a philosophy that the most work people do to kind of mess themselves up, like you're saying, is they're trying to take it from 95% to 100%, when 85% would be perfectly good for most people out there in the known world. A lot of times 75% would be good enough for most people in the world. But an artist to get it to that 95% perfection, which is way better than good enough, especially if it's a completed work, and they'll waste 2, 10, 5 years, 100 revisions trying to get it from 95% to 100% when they can just put it out there. Do you believe that's a fair assessment?
That's right. And you do not get wrapped up in trying to pound out words or pound out pages because you've got this number in your mind, right? It's not a legitimate novel unless it's 75,000 words, or it's not a legitimate novel unless it's 98,000 words. The numbers thing has got to go away. And as the reader, don't waste my time. If I am reading your work, please don't shower me with descriptions I don't need. Don't introduce characters that aren't important. For what? For pages? As the reader, you've got to keep me in your work, right? You don't need to make it doesn't have to be thick. It doesn't have to be pulp. It just needs to be the longer you're passionate about what it is that you're doing, the better it's going to be. Because like I said in the email, the passion will translate into your work, right? But when you're drumming out, some of these details that you don't want to do. He was wearing a plaid suit with a green tie and a vest. I don't need it as the reader. You don't need to put it down as the writer. And frankly, it doesn't do anything for you. Alice in Wonderland is 27,000 words long. It doesn't qualify as a novel, right? But it's to the point. It's all to the point. Everything that happens has a purpose for happening. It's not exactly, it's not prose, right? Sometimes it's not terribly eloquent, but it's brilliant. And part of the reason why it's brilliant is that it is concise. It doesn't try to be more than what it begins to explain itself as, right? We don't need to make something more than what it needs to be. If your plot is the guy gets the gun, he shoots the guy, and this is the unravelment, well then that's it. Don't turn this into 250 pages. Please.
Right. Now I really like what you were saying about passion. That passion will translate.
Your passion will translate. That's right. When you write something that you are entertained by or you genuinely think is going to entertain other people, it is going to translate into your words. When you believe in what it is that you're putting down, when you're enjoying what it is that you're putting down, when you respect what it is that you're putting down, and sometimes when you've come to grips with yourself that you don't respect what you've put down, but you're trying to finish this, right? Because you need to finish it because it will set you up to finish more things. Right?
That's powerful. Could you speak to that authority thing, that what finishing gives you authority? Could you expound on that for us?
Well, all of us, and anybody that is taking time to listen to this, has already written pages. Some pages and pages and pages. Some maybe even entire manuscripts, right? Now, passion. Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about
No, we're talking about finishing.
We're talking about finishing.
The authority that comes from finishing.
Well, authority with other people or authority with yourself, right? Because it's going to translate both ways. The way people see you and the way you see yourself from finishing your work is going to be rewarded in and of itself, right? Even for finishing it. Even if it's terrible. Even if it's terrible, at least you finished what you started.
Yes.
And then the next thing that you start is not going to look that same way because you've already done it. When you go run the obstacle course, the second time you run it, you know how to pace yourself. You know how to circumvent the obstacles already because you've already been over them. Doesn't make them easier, But you've been through it, so you understand that if you just persevere, you'll get over it. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, the obstacle does not become easier. The act of writing never gets easier. It's, blah, blah, blah. And maybe, some people can. They could churn out page after page after page. But then the next question is someone going to buy that? Mm-hmm. Right? Now, if you're writing for money, and probably 99.9% are writing for money in some way, shape, or form, because if you weren't writing for money, I can go online and grab your work anytime I want, right? Because you put it up for free, because you're like, hey, read my work, it's free. But I just don't see that too frequently, right?
You don't.
Because people want some kind of congratulations for what it is that they've done.
Right.
If you're not passionate about what you're writing is not even interesting to you. If it's not interesting to you, how on earth is it going to be interesting to me? You, as the writer, are interested in what it is that you're writing, so that I am, as the reader, not only am interested in what it is that you're writing, but I am following your same line of interest, so that I can draw some of the same conclusions that you are drawing while you're writing, so that together, you as the writer and I am the reader are actively having a dialogue, right? Because you are passionate and interested in your work. If you are not passionate and interested in your work, it is going to be blah.
You know what's so cool about that is that you're making it very clear that people are not buying some words on a paper. They're buying passion, they're buying inspiration, they're buying the human experience, they're buying the spirit, that inspiration, that spirit inside of that person. If you're not feeling that spirit, now here's the trouble with that, in my opinion. How do you reconcile the two between do the work of writing, put those words down on paper, and also having the passion? Because some people I got to wait till I'm in the mood. And then you told me this awesome analogy of the 1950s character who, could you explain on that and tell us how those two can come together?
Well, like there's a classic poster where, it talks about the true writer, and, it's a picture of this guy. He's got a notepad, and he's got a pen, but in the background, like the wife is burning something in the oven, and the kids are going crazy, and the boss is telephoning, and the phone is ringing off the hook, because that's what it is. It's about fitting writing into your day, right? Like you've got to take care of your responsibility. You still have to be a human being. You still have to interact. You've got to have your job, the job that pays, not the writing job, the job that pays, right? Because writing, no one is going to pay you until you've got that completed product. First and foremost, right? Now, granted, if you go and you get a letter from your peers that states that you have attended college for X amount of time and you've shown that you've got the discipline to pay attention, it means, well, really nothing, right? Because we're going to come back to, you've heard of Dan Brown, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the Da Vinci Code, right? Who published the Da Vinci Code? Who knows, right? Who knows? DAW, Simon & Schuster, Tor, right? Unknown. Because we as the public don't pay attention to this, right? We as critics, the first thing that we say to each other is, who published you, right? But we as the public have no clue who publishes what. We don't pay attention to the brand at that level. We pay attention to the brand when it's someone's name rather than when it's the company, right? Like, it doesn't matter, if Del Rey published you, because nobody, they might recognize the name. Sure, oh, Del Rey, right? But what else has Del Rey published? What about the 200,000 titles that they have spun out that are absolute garbage? Like, on what authority are they extending to me as the reader? Like, well, you can take it on good faith, right? Bona fide. It's bona fide.
Yeah.
Good faith.
Yeah.
You take it on good faith because we published it. Well, what does that mean? Right? And what's amazing is that as long as it is sensationalized, like, not to get into marketing too much, but as long as it's sensationalized, people will pay attention because it's just about attracting people with lights, right? Because it has nothing to do. How many times do you go to the movie? My book is $13. It's 208 pages. It took me 7 years to write. I hope it takes more than 7 hours to read. But let's say that it takes 7 hours to read. It's $13. Now, when you went to the movie and you paid $13 for that 2-hour movie, were you absolutely enchanted with everything that you saw, or were you let down? And the question is this: if it wasn't like 10 for 10, if it wasn't the best story with the best screenplay and the best music and the best costuming and the best acting and so on and so forth, and it cost $284 million in order to make this thing, and 400,000 people had to put it together, how can it still be that bad?
But it happens.
But it does happen. That's right. And that's where the passion, like we don't see the passion in that work because there's no passion behind it. Clearly this is all about a product. It's all about spinning it out in a very flashy way so that people will pay for it, and then blah, blah, blah. And then we'll forget. We'll forget that Lionsgate spun that out, and we'll go see the next Lionsgate movie because we don't realize that, blah, blah, blah. Because it doesn't matter who made it. It doesn't matter who published it. What matters is that it doesn't matter who publishes or published V.C. Andrews. V.C. Andrews is a juggernaut of book sales. Novels come out every year. Well, V.C. Andrews has been dead for 20 years, right? It's an estate. But because the estate is a name, now we start to, now there's some authority in there. So by finishing your work, by having this completed product, there's your authority. It's not who published you. It's not whether or not you spent $80,000 putting yourself through college in order to have a diploma or a doctorate that says that you're capable of studying and writing the English language. The bottom line of it is this: neither of these things is going to help you complete your product. You've got to sit down and just pound it out and have something to show for your effort. Even if it's crap, at least you've got something to show for your effort. And frankly, if you believe in it, take it to the next level, right? Just take it to a small-time publisher. You're going to have to peddle it yourself either way. Big publisher, small publisher, your own publisher, you have to peddle your own work, which means you should believe in what you're doing. And that is why Nicholas Sparks was successful with The Notebook. He took it door to door. No mainstream publishing house would put him down. And, what a phenomenal success that is.
Yeah, and same thing with a great deal of writers who, Stephen King's Carrie was thrown in the garbage. It was turned down so many times. His wife picked it out of the garbage and sent it, and, the rest is history. And Wayne Dyer, he went on the road, with his Your Erroneous Zone thing. And he went on the road with it because everybody turned him down. And there's something about tenacity and something about passion. And I love what you said about finishing it. And one of your quotes that really inspired me greatly was, write the book that you want to read. Can you speak about on that you would like to read?
Yeah. Well, first, if you're writing, if you have decided that you want to write, maybe not why you want to write, like that's the first part of what it is that we're talking about, but you've decided that you do want to write, well, chances are you would be best suited to write the story that you want to read in the first place. Like, if you're putting your pen to paper, the person that inspires me, like the person I look up to strongest as far as a literary figure is J.R. Tolkien. I love Tolkien. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the man. My writing does not look anything like his writing. Okay? But this is the guy that I think, like, if there was any other writer that I wanted to be, if I wanted to be known for work, man, I'm really impressed with his work. Now, I don't love all of his work. I love some of his work, nor would I expect anyone to love all of my work, right? But it is still definitely a work. I'm getting off track here.
That's all right.
But writing the book that you want to read, like back to this comment, if you really want to be passionate about what it is that you're putting down, imagine yourself as the reader while you're writing, right? Like, put yourself in your own shoes. You are reading your own work. Read it objectively. Right. Read it for the first time, right? Even though you're writing it, and it's going to be hard to distance yourself from your work. But you need to look at what it is that you're putting down. But yeah, I mean, don't let yourself down, right? Like, you are a writer, and that is because you are a reader. And the titles that you are attracted to, that is probably the kind of work that you're going to create, right? And or you have found a story that you think that you could write better, and you're determined to write it better, or so on and so forth. It doesn't really matter what your motivation is, half as much as that you have an idea as to where you want to go with whatever it is that you're putting down.
Did you complete your idea prior to writing the book?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I spent Well, I spent about 4 years just taking random notes that for no particular purpose. But at about the 4-year mark is when the very first time I put down an actual outline. And I'm like, okay, so here's the beginning of the book, here's how the book flows, and here's the end of the book. Now, that is not how it ended up. My first outline was not successful. My first outline was wrong. It wasn't wholly wrong, but it was partially wrong. A lot of the chapters, as it turns out, had the wrong name. And then some of my characters had the wrong name too, right? And then some of the things that some of the characters did needed to be done by other characters because it made more sense, and so on and so forth. So, I didn't have to stay within that outline, but until I created the outline, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just taking notes and putting them in a bag.
Beautiful. So the outline allowed you to really be able to fine-tune this thing like never before. Like you wouldn't have been able to fine-tune it the way you fine-tuned it, because this thing is razor sharp. God, Man, and the Machine, author Daniel Strazel, we're talking with today. If you have not gotten the book, please get the book. It is an amazing read. I'm not too much of a fiction guy, but man, this book blew my mind. And we loved having the honor of being able to be a part of the book group at your place. That was powerful. Everybody in there, much to Daniel's chagrin, was like, this should be a movie. This is so good. This is so great. This should be a movie, man. It's like everybody says that to him, but he wants it to stay literature, and we respect and honor that. True writers sticking with literature, and that's beautiful.
You're tuned in to the Legacy House Publishing Group podcast with Ross Jones. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Writing a book is hard. Getting it published is even harder, especially when secular publishers don't understand your Christian book. Legacy House Publishing Group is a Christ-centered, kingdom-focused company. We do marketing, PR, cover design, book formatting, and we can show you how to get published even on a shoestring budget. Whether you have written Christian fiction, nonfiction, poetry, or a children's book, we can help you. Visit LegacyHousePublishingGroup.net to learn more.
We now return to the Legacy House Publishing Group podcast with Ross Jones, where Christian publishing is made easy.
Bringing in Christ into your craft, into your art. How do you use that? You're talking about glorifying God through your craft, and I just wanted to know about your thoughts on how do you walk out the Christian walk in the pursuit of your writing craft.
Well, whatever you put your hands to, if you dedicate your work to God, if you dedicate your work to Jesus Christ, it has meaning. In whatever you put your hands to, if it is sweeping the front porch or if it is writing a novel, no matter what it is that you're putting your hands to, you've got to dedicate your works to God. And for the first time, your works will have meaning. Which, it's okay for you to have flavor and individuality. It's okay for you to write something and maybe you're not really sure as to, well, you should be confident that what you're doing is the right thing. I think that's probably pretty important for the Christian writer, but I mean, not to be taken out of context, you also should not necessarily feel constrained by it either. Like, it's not a limiting thing, it's a releasing thing, right? And you can write that transitional couple of sentences and then give it up to Christ. Right? Like, put your burden on him. We were talking about earlier during the Bible study, right? Like, anything that you can't handle on your own, you've got to put back on Christ. And during the time that you're writing, it's going to be the exact same thing. You're going to pen a few pages that you don't like, and you're just going to have to give it up to Christ, right? Like, God, please help me either make this okay or let me come back to it later and, tune it up, blah, blah, blah. But getting over it and getting on with it. But again, because I've dedicated my work to God, it has meaning. Now, if I write a whole book and I lose the book, it has the same amount of meaning. If I write the whole book in Word and Word goes corrupt and I lose my book on my computer, I can't get it back. But it still has the same amount of meaning to God. God doesn't need to see that book. He's already seen it. And you, as the number one reader, have already read it. Now, granted, maybe no one else got to read your work. But even then, if you finished your work, then you know exactly what you got to do the next time around. And it's not about that. You can't glorify yourself. You can't trumpet your own name and think that that's going to make you feel whole or full. It won't. No matter how much prestige and glory and achievement that you think that you can muster on this earth, it means nothing to God unless it's donated to God. And when you donate it to God, God is really just interested that you are pursuing it passionately in His name. Right? Like, God doesn't want you to approach it with a lackluster demeanor. You know, if you you would never do such a thing if He were standing there looking down on you. Well, that's exactly what He's doing. But that's not why you do it. Right? Even that's not why you do it. You just do it because it glorifies God. God can write it without you. God can write it with someone else. God can do whatever it is that God already wants. God already knows your book because He knows your heart. And your heart was written in your book before it ever made it to your hand. So,
your book was written in your heart before it ever made it to your hand. You
right.
said your heart was written in your book.
That's right.
Okay.
Man.
That's good, though, man.
Heart,
I was paying attention.
Your hand, yeah. Well, I mean, but you know, that much is true. And God makes determinations about mankind based on their heart. You know, men make determinations about men based on their hands.
That's right. That's right. The dedication of your efforts and your work to God. The Westminster Confession. What is the purpose of man? To glorify God
That's right.
and enjoy Him forever,
That's right.
So if we really dedicate our works to God, it does have meaning. And that's one of the greatest pursuits of men is, how do we have meaning? Donate it to God. Say, God, this is yours. And watch the power of the Holy Spirit come upon that thing and do things. Because your book brought together people in our church that would not have been brought together unless you finish your book. And that's what I try to tell people all the time. There are people waiting on you to finish what God has put in you to do. There's people that I would not have met or been able to fellowship with as much if you would not have finished your book. So I'm asking our audience, what is it that God has put on you that you need to finish? Because there are people waiting on you. Mr. Strauss, is there anything else that you want for the audience to know about writing, about life, about anything that you would like to know before signing off?
Well, you know, from one human being to another, from one writer to another, you know, man, I'm cheering on anybody that wants to write. You know, as far as my perception of life is concerned, I can think of no enterprise more noble, no more rewarding than writing. Like, what could possibly be more rewarding than writing? You know, as a Christian, we immediately go to Scripture, right? Sola Scriptorum, right? Writing. That is because of writing. That is what writing does. It is the greatest gift one can give to posterity. Per my email, right? It is the only thing that you will ever do that is going to last more time than you think it's going to. But it won't last all time, right? Like that's where we come back to God. Nothing lasts forever except for God's love, right? And only you will last forever if you love God.
That's right. That's true, brother. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much for your time here. Thank you for the inspiration, the words of wisdom. With your permission, I'd like to put your letter, your email onto the website as a guest blog, so you can find that at legacyhousepublishinggroup.net, and I hope you check it out. It will inspire, encourage, and motivate you. Now, Daniel, would you close us out with prayer? Would you pray for the writers out there, for the leaders, for the people that are seeking to give meaning and glorify God? Would you do that for us to close us out, please?
Absolutely. Dear Lord, thank you for giving us this opportunity to do this podcast. Hopefully it reaches a lot of people, and that you understand that the message to be taken from this is, pursue your work. You know, give it up to God, and understand that has given it purpose. Please come into us and give us the determination to finish. Help us understand what our passions are so that we could funnel them and direct them so that we can complete what it is that we started. And not just in writing, but in everything that we do in life, because one discipline translates into the next. Dear God, thank you so much. Thank you for health. Thank you for happiness. Thank you for our church. Thank you for the world. Thank you for all of our brothers and sisters. Thank you for giving us justice past the point in time of this life. Thank you for releasing us of all the burdens of the world. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen and amen. God bless you, my brother. Thank you. Until next time, folks, visit us online, LegacyHousePublishingGroup.net, and find out more Christian inspiration and motivation to reach your highest destination.
Thank you for listening to the Legacy House Publishing Group podcast with Ross Jones. For more Christian publishing made easy, visit us on the web at legacyhousepublishinggroup.net.